Okay, so the regulation that we are going to cover today would be amalgamation and transfer of business. That means when two insurance company are getting merged, what are the rules and guidelines that are getting followed? Yeah, let's get on with it. So the first point is every scheme of amalgamation or transfer has to be kind of under this regulation was to be submitted to the authority with the proposed draft or scheme, right, and containing related information as kind of given in the annex of this regulation. We'll see what are the documents that are required. Now, no one can go for merger or amalgamation or transfer without prior approval of the authority, provided the authority might also reject the application based on the following things. And you'll see that these are the portions that you have heard in some other regulations. So that is if the available solvency margin of the merged entity is below the required solvency margin, if it is not compliant with the applicable laws and regulations and guidelines, if it is not in the interest of the policyholder, and if it is not in the interest of the insurance industry. And if you remember the same thing, same guidelines you have kind of studied in issuance of capital regulation, right? So you can go to the issuance of capital regulation, which have already been covered, and you can see that same guidelines has been kind of given here. So, and this is kind of similar way, like merger is kind of getting some capital, right? I mean, for one company it might be getting some capital. So I mean that same consideration applies here. Anyways, so any scheme of amalgamation has to be preceded by a 2 months notice of intention, kind of reflecting the nature and the scope of transaction, and the authority will be requiring four certified copies of the following documents. The following documents would be, once we know that we have to kind of submit a proposed scheme or deed or agreement under which the amalgamation or transfer is going to take place. The financial statements, which would include the balance sheet, the P&L, etc., that would be submitted, and which has to be prepared as per preparation of financial statements and auditors report regulations. We have already covered that, preparation of financial auditors report. Secondly, it will require financial condition report, once again covered, appointed actuary report. So appointed actuary report is a part of ARA report. We have not covered that, but it's just there are multiple reports that kind of goes into that. So I mean, it's just a format and structure of numbers that is flowing through that report. So the opponent actually kind of make comments on various things. So the opponent actually report, the financial condition report, the solvency statement of the insurers, that has to be kind of provided to the authority. And external independent actually kind of making an assessment of the amalgamation or transfer, and he or she should not be involved with either of the transacting parties in 5 years, in the preceding 5 years, on the from the date that on which he or she is signing the paper. An executive summary, because it is going to the regulator has rarely has time. So executive summary kind of highlighting the main points. Compliance with the policyholder interest, it compliance with the maintaining the policyholder interest, and compliance with any applicable laws or guidelines as prevalent in the country, that is India, but not limited to, but definitely consideration will be given to the Competition Commission of India, Competition Act of India, which is 2002. That if merger of two businesses resulting in a monopoly, then that would be stopped. So that's basically the purpose of Competition Commission of India. Now, the copies of that scheme or arrangement would be kind of kept in the principal office and the branch offices for the inspection by the members means the authority pupil and policy holders. And an authority might also direct the kind of the policy, the insurer to kind of publish advertisement or send notice to each resident of India who holds the policy, life insurance policy, not only of this insurers, like not only the transacting parties, but for any insurer, that is kind of like any person who is a policyholder of any insurer, that they might be the transacting parties might be required to send notices of this merger and acquisition to them. The obviously the independent actual valuation, the authority can cause independent actual valuation of the transacting parties with respect to the asset, liabilities, and the solvency position. Now, then after this, the authority can grant in principle approval, right? So what the authority will kind of hear the directors, the concerned policyholders, and on being kind of satisfied there is no reasonable objection from the policyholders, and this deed or scheme is in favor of the orderly growth of the policyholders, the authority may grant in principle approval against the terms and condition as it may deem appropriate. Okay. However, there would be a couple of things like provided that so in regard to this, because the authority kind of needs to go through the application process, the information, so there will be some fees involved. We'll see later in this regulation what is the maximum minimum fees or what are the fees that would be charged. But the fees is involved. So both the transacting parties are required to make deposit, right? So in this case, because there is a merger acquisition going on, so one of the transacting parties can back off. This portion would be kind of related to that backing off. So the deposit made, the deposit made by the transacting parties can be returned. The deposit made is complete. However, if the partial deposit is made, then the deposit that has been made would be returned to the extent the money has been utilized, and to the extent the money that is not required, that portion of the deposit can be returned. However, it is also possible that the deposit made is partial, and in such cases, the portion of the deposit might be appropriated for future payments with respect to the transacting parties. And here the transacting parties would be what we are calling the person who is kind of carrying the amalgamated business, or to the transferor person who would be to whom the business would be transferred. So provided further that this merger or this scheme of amalgamation may result in reduction in insurance or contract, and the authority may such allow those under some terms, under such terms and conditions, and such terms and conditions will be binding for all the parties. That includes the stakeholders, the policyholders, etc. Everyone would be included, because it might be harmful for few policyholders, but for a greater good, it might be better for many policyholders. So some of the policies might be rejected. It might not be part of the merged entity. So, the insurance, the overall number of insurance contract or the sum assured or the risk might be reduced in order to kind of for the greater good, right? Now, effect of in principle approval by the authority. So the effect of in principle approval by the authority would include that in the interim time period, right? In the interim time period, like when the authority has given the in principle approval, but the final approval from the court is not obtained. So in that time period, the insurer is still required to follow the guidelines of the Insurance Act as per 1938, and the insurer is also required to kind of follow the regulations and guidelines that the authority has issued from time to time. Also, the authority might impose some requirements from the insurers with respect to his assets, like ring facing the assets, and require the insurers or the transacting parties to report on regular intervals. So as I mentioned, the insurer would kind of keep their scheme or agreement from on the registered office and branch office, and it cause the authority to kind of get those approval, and the policyholders might go to the offices for inspection. The authority might also force the insurers or the transacting parties to publish about scheme in one vernacular newspaper and one national daily. Right, as you can see, the authority can kind of direct the transacting parties to make up advertisement in the newspaper. Now, after getting the in principle approval from the authority, the transacting parties should seek further approval from other regulatory bodies. That would include the High Court or the tribunals, RBI or Foreign Investment Promotion, FIPB, Foreign Investment Promotion Board. Any if there is a joint partner, foreign venture partner involved, then there would be then there might be a approval required from the regulator of that country, foreign country. It might not also be required. Also, any other guidelines or circular as may be issued by SEBI, and so approval would be required from Security Exchange Board of India. So after the granting of the in principle, after getting all this approval, the insurer would be kind of ready for the final approval, and the authority will provide the final approval. So when the authority provide the final approval, it would be on a particular date, and from that date, that approval or the scheme should be binding for all the stakeholders, that like the employees, the shareholders, the directors. It would be applicable for all the shareholders, and there would be, that would mean that from that date, the property and the asset of the transferee insurer would be transferred and vested to the transferor insurer, and similarly the liabilities of the transfer insurer will also be vested to transfer insurer. In case of there is if there is any conflict, the authority would work with the transacting parties for the speedy speedy resolution of that conflict. And finally, the charges. So the authority, as you know, that IRDA is located in Hyderabad. So the authority will require a demand draft issued in favor of IRDA, payable at Hyderabad from a scheduled bank, and that would the fees would be 1/10 of 1% of the gross premium written in India, or subject to a minimum of 50 lakhs and maximum of 5 crore. Right, so that is the fees, and that deposit has to be made by either of the transacting parties, and that's what I kind of called out there, that if you are making the deposit, right, if you are making the deposit, some part of the deposit, if your deposit is completed, then and you are kind of backing up, then the entire deposit can be given to you. If some work is done by the authority, and then some portion of the deposit would be given back to you, of which the work is not required to be done, and provided you have made partial deposit, then the authority may not return the deposit to you at all, and that deposit will be appropriated for any future payments that the insurer would be, like the person who is kind of carrying on the amalgamated business or the transferor insurer, they might require to make any future payments to the authority, and that payment would be kind of used to make way for those payments, right? And finally, when at the end of everything, like the final approval is given, the final date has arrived, and then the authority fees has been paid, then there would be timing. So the authority shall process and pass appropriate orders on the application of amalgamation as expeditiously as possible. And also the board of directors of the transferred, like the transferor insurers, that they need to kind of communicate to the authority that every payment has been made, or the payment is in process, and there is, to the best of their knowledge, they do not know any other payment that has to be kind of put into motion. And also a certified copy of the scheme or the agreement that has to be transferred by the amalgamated insurer. So yeah, that's it. And I mean, I hope that you are able to understand. It's a simple regulation, but it's a very important regulation. And yeah, I hope that this is helpful. And yeah, see you in future videos.